Shalom and good day all, this is Healing29 back again for another anime review, and in this anime review I am reviewing Garouden, The Way of the Lone Wolf. And in this particular series, or of this anime series, it has 8 episodes. And what I'll do is I'll bring up the episode I'm talking about, bring up the synopsis. And after I bring up the synopsis, I'll talk a little bit about the episode and then move on to the next one. And that's how it will go in regards to each episode. And then I'll give my overall review in relation to this particular series. So now it's time to get started as I move on to episode 1. Episode 1, it's a bit of a pity that with each of these episodes we don't have any titles in relation to them. That's sort of like my only criticism. But apart from that, let's move directly into what episode 1 has to say about itself and also talk about the episode. So, the synopsis for episode 1 is, while hiding out in Hokkaido, Juzo rescues travelers from a bear with his impressive fight puts him on the radar of the law and an illicit group. Now, in this particular episode, we follow a person or a key character who we learn is on the run from the law, and his name is called Juzo. We do get his surname a little bit later on within the story, but we also learn that this character has also learned a certain style of martial arts. And with this particular event of time, we have basically some hikers going through the wilderness. They encounter a bear. After they encounter this bear, they're unable to escape. In comes Juzo to save their hides, and eventually the bear ends up running. And hearing of the feats, of course, we have the law get involved, as they are looking for Juzo, as he's sort of like meant to be a fugitive on the run. And we do soon understand why he's on the run a little bit later on, once we get the further episodes. But the illicit group that is brought up is sort of like an underground group that does like underground martial arts tournaments. And we will learn about who they are once we get further in the episodes. So jumping into episode 2, after defeating a karate master Ichiro, so this is Juzo, he ends up going against a karate master, sort of like after saving his daughter from some unkindly men. And with this, the karate master or the karate teacher does eventually sort of like want to fight him one-on-one, and he does get that fight, but he also helps him evade police capture. So Juzo narrowly evades the police, but someone is leaking his whereabouts to the martial artists who want a piece of him. So we also learned that there are sort of like other martial arts groups or other martial arts styles that might want to face him head on. And with this, there is an encounter with someone else who does end up seeking some training from someone he knows. So jumping into episode 3, training under Rambo, Jose struggles to land a single hit. Meanwhile, Juzo confronts his inner beast and reflects on his dark past. So in episode 3, we understand one of the things that Juzo is actually running away from in relation to his past, and it has to do with the death of someone, basically who was trying to harm someone he knows by the name of Seiko. And we do get to see that flashback and understand why he did what he did. But even though the situation as to, even though the consequences of the situation led him to sort of like being taken in, and it sort of feels like, okay, this is sort of like the first time he's actually been through the hoops of the justice system, and now because he's shown up again, they want to sort of like bring him back into the prison system. This is something where I think the storytelling could probably be a little bit better. But the beast that it's talking about in the series is sort of like the character's inner beast, sort of like wanting to not be so wild in the way he fights and reacts against opponents, wanting to be more in control. And we do get to see that in further episodes. So jumping into episode 4, Juzo comes face to face with the mysterious sergeant who blackmails him into joining the underground tournament of Kodoku, where he's forced to brawl. So we learn that there's an underground group which sort of like which links back to the first episode, and this underground group is called Kodoku, and what they do is arrange tournaments to take place in certain places around Japan, and also with certain fighters, and we get to see how these fights take place. By the time we do move into this, there are sort of like a couple of fights that take place. Jumping into episode 5, in the middle of Juzo's first match, Ryu Omaru lands a powerful strike that doesn't resemble any traditional sumo moves, awakening Juzo's inner beast. Now, with this, the inner beast is sort of like where, once again, it sort of like releases him to go completely wild against the opponent he's facing. And whilst he's going wild in facing this opponent, you can definitely see that a lot of harm will take place. Moving into episode 6, we have it mentions former king of the cage. Mifune has a secret weapon, being his son, and Juzo must overcome Kaito's uncanny ability to read moves. So Kaito is the son of Mifune, and we learn that he's able to read the moves of his opponents and pass them on to his father, who is Kage Mifune, and in his earpiece. And whilst this is happening, he must personally learn to overcome what the son is doing to sort of like give his father the upper hand in the fight, to which he eventually does, and puts the son in a bit of a stalemate. But we do learn that this, when we do meet the character of the son is a little bit younger than what one expects in the story. So if I were to guess the character's age, probably about 12, maybe 13, just early teens, in regards to the character's son. I could be incorrect there, especially if manga-wise or whatever else, the character might be younger than what I expect. But it was really interesting seeing this fight, to which, as you had the son sort of like giving certain numbers to his father, who is up against Juzo, you have Juzo himself trying to work out how to counter these particular attacks. And it takes him a while to learn to break what the son is doing, to eventually pull off what he needed to do, just get through into the next part of the Kodoku tournament. Jumping into episode 7, we finally reach the end of what would be the Kodoku matches, and we do sort of like get a lot of things sped up in regards to, say, the rest of his matches, or Juzo's matches. So we get to see some of the opponents. We really don't get to learn any of their names, which I think is a bit of a negative in this particular thing, as it would have been nice to learn the names of his opponents that he had defeated in this particular tournament, until, of course, he beats the last opponent. And with this, he also helps for one of the friends that he made, who's also been learning under a different instructor, to sort of like to tame his beast a little bit more, or inner beast a little bit more when it comes to fighting and whatever. And one of the things that he requests is that his friend Rambo, who's sort of like the person on board as his manager in a way, is able to fight again. And the other thing that he sort of wanted was a fight with someone someone of another dojo. Now, with episode 7, we have Bunshichi's quest for ultimate strength leads him to the Takamiya dojo. Juzo is set on confessing to Saiko. Some news, but the Himekawa stands in the way. The Himekawa is basically the Himekawa dojo, and this is where it leads to Juzo making his way in relation to a tournament. And in this particular tournament, he ends up taking out the main opponent of the opponent that he wanted to fight in relation to a particular dojo. And they then set up in episode 8, which I'm about to move on to. And episode 8 states it's the ultimate face-off. Juzo Fujimaki versus Tsutomu Himekawa. The Takamiya style versus the Hokushinkan school. Has the Lone Wolf met his match? And in this, we do get quite an event. And in this particular event, we get to see Juzo and Tsutomu fight it out in quite a match. And this match probably goes for about, if I were to guess, maybe 10 minutes within the story. And we get to see him pull off certain moves in connection to both of their styles. And in the end, X wins. I'm not going to say who wins. I'm going to have to leave that for you to watch and check out for yourself, as it was quite interesting as to how the match ended. But as soon as the match ended, the people who had sort of like a warrant for Juzo's arrest, they did end up coming to take him away. We do end up seeing the character show up again towards the end of the story, but in this time it sort of looks like he served his time, and now it's time to sort of like move on to learn more about the actual style that he was brought up in, and that being the Takamiya style. So jumping into the next overall thing, and that is my afterthoughts. I must admit, with this series, I was hoping this series would have been a little bit maybe like Baki Hamna, but it proved to be a different beast in its own rights. And it felt like this story was probably written for an older audience. The way it comes across, like a way older audience, probably those who have a little bit of experience under their belts. In other words, it had the story felt like it could accommodate for older watchers of martial arts films. And I guess in a way I'd sort of fall in that category too, because as you were watching each of the episode, it really took its time with like the main character and the additional characters it was bringing in. It did its best sort of like not to overcompensate in the episode, and also not to put too much in the episode, to which the audience was able to appreciate what was happening in the story. Next, I want to move into talking about the voice acting in it. I actually quite enjoyed the voice acting in regards to all of the characters that were in the story, whether it was Juzo, whether it was Ranbo, whether it was some of the instructors in the story, even the Kadoku. It was actually really quite well done. My only criticism, though, in relation to this, the overall story I think is great, but I really think if they want to fix this series up, they got to do something about the opening and the ending theme song. I didn't really enjoy the opening and ending theme song, though I understand what they're trying to do with it, to try to get the audience in a bit of an understanding as to what this story involves. That's my only criticism. So, jumping into the next thing, and that is the rating of course, the overall rating. So, starting off with the main characters, I think with the main characters, I might just give it a 7.5 out of 10. And that main character would basically be Juzo, some of his friends that are around him. Next are the supporting characters, which would lead to, say, members of the police in the story, and other members of other styles that are in the story. But this story sort of felt like it was more focused on two particular styles and their sort of like brawl between each other. One being the Hokushinken, the Hokushinken style, and the Takamiya style, as it's sort of like between two martial arts groups instead of like multiple. And I think that is sort of like one little bonus thing that sort of works as a bit of a positive in the story, where if you were to go to Kengan Ashura or Baki Hamna, it's just constantly against different fighters of different styles, and you just don't know what to expect of the story. This, it's sort of kept it simple. The main fight is sort of like between these two distinct styles, but you will see fights between other styles before this big fight. So for the supporting characters, I give a 7.5 out of 10. Next is the area of the soundtrack. If I were to give the soundtrack anything, probably a 7 out of 10 overall. Next is the area of the animation, to which I give a 7.5 out of 10. Last but not least is the area of the story, to which I give a 7.5 out of 10. Well, until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.
Breaking master boss and culture. ここで壊すか。赤く晴れたビジョン。 Sucker, so, 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 so.